Joining me on the channel today is Crystal Maldonado, author of Fat Chance Charlie Vega, out now from Holiday House. It's about a teen coming of age as a fat brown girl in a white Connecticut suburb. Welcome, Crystal.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So excited to have you. And I always like to start at the beginning and explore your journey to becoming a published author. What sort of kid were you?
Oh man, so I actually was a very introverted kid. I loved books. I loved drawing. Like I was really into like sketching things out in like little art pads and like notebooks and things like that. I went to the library a lot. So I was a very like internal kid. I also watched a lot of TV, I'll be honest. So it was like always like playing pretend with like my cousin and my brother and things like that. So I would say like I've always had a really strong love for like imaginations and like the written word and reading and just kind of like going on adventures, but in books and not so much like in real life.
What sort of books did you like reading as a kid?
So I read a lot of like contemporary books. So as a kid, I really, really loved stories about just like kids my age who were doing things. So like I remember very early on, like I loved things like the Babysitter's Club. I loved that series. I loved the Boxcar Children series, which is about like these kids who live in an actual like train boxcar and have to like figure out how to live their life. And I just loved stories like those that I felt like, oh, maybe this could happen to me someday, or I could go on little adventures. And then like as I got a little older, I loved reading about love. Like I was so into stories where there were crushes and like kissing and like pining and all kinds of stuff, but like age appropriate.
How did you go from, being a reader to wanting to write your own book and wanting to go on this publishing journey?
That's, I feel like, such a good question. So I have like this really vivid memory of when I was in third grade. So that I would have been what, like 8 or 9 or so. And my class was like preparing for these like mastery tests that every school has to take. Like you've got to take these classes and it's like standardized testing and whatever. And we were talking about essays. And my teacher was walking us through it and was like, you'll have X amount of time to work on this essay. And she handed all the papers out and everything. And like, this was a practice run. And I remember getting the essay and the prompt and just being like, this is so amazing. I get to make up whatever I want and just write whatever comes to mind. And like, I remember having like the best time and needing more, like asking for more lined paper, because this was back when we were like writing everything by hand, and like raising my hand and like, I need more paper. And I went over the time. So I'm like watching all of my classmates like get up and hand their things in. And I'm still going, just writing like, this is the best. How come everyone's not taking advantage of the full amount of time? So I just knew like at that point, I was like, okay, maybe my love of words is a little weirder than, than everyone else's. And so I remember like at that time, I started just writing small little stories. I mean, I was young, so they didn't make sense really. And then it wasn't until like late middle school and like early high school that I started writing or trying to write like longer form stories. So I grew up in the early, like I was a teen in like the early 2000s. So it was really peak like boy band culture, like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, 98 Degrees. And I loved them. And I started writing boy band fan fiction, which is so embarrassing.
Love it.
But yeah, so I started writing that with some friends. And so that was where I started exploring like longer form writing and like things with like chapters in them and high stakes drama and whatever. And then it just became a thing, like writing just became a thing I loved to do for fun. So I kept coming back to it, when I was in college and when I wanted to just like escape from the world, I would always find myself coming back to just writing.
Love it. And how did you go about getting your first agent? What was that whole process like?
So I don't know if this is a unique story, but I will say I was totally brand new to publishing. So I didn't know anything about going about getting your book published. So I really did a lot of Googling to figure out the specifics. I didn't know about like the Twitter writing community. I didn't know about the book community on YouTube. Like I didn't know anything. So I basically wrote a book because I loved writing and I really wanted to write one for myself and my own joy. And then I was like sitting on this finished manuscript and I was like, okay, well, I guess I should try to do something with this, right? So I ended up just Googling and like going on Reddit and trying to read, okay, well, I wrote a book, now what? And I ended up researching and learning about query letters and finding agents and things like that, and finding blogs. Like there's a blog I think called Query Shark out there that explains like, here's how you write a query letter. Yeah, exactly. So I read a lot of that.
You're not the first query shark person on the channel. Yeah.
So I read a lot of that just to get sort of my feet wet and figure out what do I actually want to do. And then I just was like, well, I'm going to just dive in and see what happens. And I had no expectations. I fully went in thinking, you know, if anyone even just reads this manuscript, that's all I care about. And I got really lucky. And so I sent out query letters to like 5 or so agents. And one of those first 5 wrote back to me and was like, I'm interested. Can we talk? Yeah, so it was really totally floored and really excited. And so that's the agent that I'm with now, Tamar Rudzinski.
After 5 queries, you sent out 5 queries.
I know. This is. I know that now. At the time, I just didn't know. I wasn't expecting anybody to even write me back, to be honest. Yeah. And I'm so lucky that Tamar has been like so wonderful, because I was like frank with her. I was like, I don't know anything about anything. So I'm really going to be leaning on you. And she's like, I got you. And so she's been phenomenal. And we did so we made edits to the book together. And then this was probably in late 2018. And so around Christmas time, she was like, you know, I'm not going to go on sub with this. We're not going to send this out to anybody. We're going to wait till the new year. So we started sending it out to folks in early 2019, and then we got rejected a bunch of times. So like, I don't want to make it seem like it was so easy and whatever. But then we heard back a couple months later that Holiday House was interested. So it was great.
But that still is pretty fast after only a couple of months, 5 queries in a couple of months. So that is super, awesome, but you'd been working on it for so long. You'd been writing in high school. So you put in the Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours probably in your high school writing. I'm just trying to make myself feel better.
It is definitely a weird situation. So
tell us about the day that you found out your book was going to be published.
So I work full time. And so I went, woke up, went to work just like a regular day. And I got the call from my agent while I was already at my desk. And I was shaking, literally shaking. I had no idea that this was going to happen. And I had sort of basically put everything in her hands and I tried to forget about it. So this was the ultimate surprise. And like I said, we had gotten a lot of rejections already. So I was starting to think maybe it wasn't going to happen at all. And I was starting to be okay with that. And so I was totally surprised. And I just blurted it out to my colleague who I shared a desk with, or shared an office with. And then I was like, I think I have to go home. I can't focus. There's no way I can work today. So I ended up going and telling my boss, and I was like, I'm taking a personal day. I have to go. And I got in the car and called my husband, just crying, so excited. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to happen. It's going to be a real book. And so I had a 45-minute drive home. So I talked to my husband probably the whole way home, and was just so over the moon excited. And then I got home, I turned on some Ariana Grande, and I had a little dance party with my dog. So So, and then my husband came home and like we had a nice dinner later and some wine and we celebrated. So it was really nice. But the dance party with my dog was probably like the best part of that day.
That's amazing. Your cover is like one of the most beautiful covers I have seen in a while. What was it like when you first saw that cover?
Oh my gosh. It like took my breath away when I saw this. So, I mean, even just from like the concept art, it was just stunning. Like I feel like I stopped in my tracks, and that was like the first thing I think that helped me feel like this was really happening, was seeing the cover, seeing the title, seeing my name. I was just like, oh my God, this is going to be a real thing. This is going to be a real book, and I can't wait. And Holiday House was really phenomenal. So the book itself talks a lot about identity, and Charlie Vega's identity plays a really key part into her story and her journey to self-love. And so she is Puerto Rican, I'm Puerto Rican. And so without me even asking, they went and found a Puerto Rican illustrator to do the art. So Erica Lugo did the art, and that was so meaningful to me that they went the extra mile to really pair up like a Puerto Rican illustrator with a Puerto Rican author telling a story about a Puerto Rican girl. I just felt like that was like connecting all of the dots, and it felt so important and huge to me. Yeah, I loved it, and I love the cover.
Yeah, gorgeous cover. Recently, you got a shout out on Instagram stories from Roxane Gay. What was that like?
Oh my God. I literally am still freaking out about that because I'm in shock. So she is truly one of my idols. Like I admire her. I've loved her writing forever. I think she's fantastic. And I just like think about how I went into this not thinking this would ever become a book. Now it's a book, and one of my favorite authors ever gave it a shout out on her Insta stories. Like, I honestly feel like I'm dreaming, and I know that's a cliche, but it really feels that way.
So, in your own words, pitch your book. Tell us about it in your own words.
Okay, so I like to say that Fat Chance Charlie Vega is really a book about love. So it's like first love, self-love, love with your friends, love with your family. It's just like at its heart, it's about love. It also has a couple of things like, so it's about fat fashion is another big part of it. It's also about a lot of feelings. I feel like when you're a teenager, you have a lot of big feelings, and I totally respect that. And I hope that this book pays respect to that. Yeah, so it's a lot about firsts. It's like a real, at its heart, like a coming of age story about love and that journey of like self-discovery.
I like it. What's your favorite step? Is it drafting or revising?
Revising. I'm terrible at drafting. So it's like there's almost too many options when you're drafting because you can make anything happen. And so I find it hard, like I almost get like choice fatigue. Like I don't know what I want to have happen next. And I love the art of like revising. It's fun to revisit the characters. It's fun for me to finally like mold it into something. And I also feel like I do well getting feedback from others and hearing what they liked, what they didn't like, and then sort of taking that as a challenge to like make the story even better.
What's been the best revision tip that you've gotten along the way?
Oh, I really like the tip to take a break. So like walking away from your story and taking some time to yourself and just like letting it sort of like you can read over the edits and read over the suggestions that you've gotten, and then just kind of sit with those and let them like mull in your brain, I guess, a little bit, and then come back and revise and edit. I feel like that's been a huge important part of it for me, is not feeling the pressure to dive like exactly in within reason, because like we all have deadlines, right? So but like taking some time to really think about it and give some space to myself has been a great tip that I've liked.
What do your first drafts look like?
Oh my God, Carly, they are a hot mess. So my first drafts, they're so bad. Like I feel like I try to close all the plot holes and you try to make sure you're touching on everything, but it's hard. A first draft is really, I feel like it's just like what your brain spits out and you hope it makes sense. And that's, I think, part of why I love the revision process so much, is because my first draft is not always the best. I will say I do go back and I like to go and read from like the beginning or read a couple of chapters before picking up writing again. So sometimes that does help, but you know, it's not great. That's why we have critique partners and why we have editors.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Ooh, so with Fat Chance Charlie Vega, I was a total just pantser. Like I didn't have everything plotted out. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to have happen. I had like the character and a couple, and like I knew I wanted it to be a love story, and I knew there would be a friends, but I didn't have everything written out. And that was fine for the book because I had all this time to work on it. Like I wasn't on a deadline. And then I'm working on book 2 now, and I realized, oh, I better actually create an outline so that I can get stuff done and stop meandering so much. So I feel like I fall somewhere kind of in the middle. So I definitely have an outline that I try my best to stick to, but sometimes when I'm writing, like a character might tell me like, oh, I don't actually want to do that, or or this scene doesn't feel right, so I give myself permission to sort of like follow the story and see where it takes me.
Do you start with the character first when you're coming up with an idea, or do you have like a plot idea first?
I think I start with character first. And so I don't know if that's good or bad. So I always feel like I have the main character in mind and I know like what their motivations are, and I don't always know where that will take them. And so sometimes the plot evolves as I'm writing, which can be interesting but also have a domino effect, because something might happen and now you have to like go back to the beginning like, oh, this happened, and now it has a ripple effect throughout the rest of the story, but it's still interesting. So
Are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
I used to, when I was a teenager, be a night writer for sure. And now I have a toddler. And so like by default, I have to be a morning writer. Like I go to bed so early. I feel like I'm in bed by like 9 o'clock. So getting up early, getting some writing done before like the chaos of the day really takes a hold on me, is what I like to do.
Was there ever a point in your journey where you feared you would never be published?
Oh my God, yes. Yes. So I think I had mentioned like when I first got started, I wrote this book without even thinking it would become like a published book. I just wrote it because I loved it. And there were multiple moments throughout the journey where I was, you know, imposter syndrome is a real thing, and we are sometimes our own worst enemies. And I would sometimes feel like, well, you know, at least agents looked at my manuscript, you know, and then I would say like, well, at least I have an agent, and if nobody wants to buy this book, then I got that far. But there were always moments, I feel like, where I thought, well, this might not happen, especially when COVID-19 hit. So when we got into the pandemic, like my book was originally supposed to come out in fall 2020. And the pandemic just like shifted everything and made everything so confusing and alarming. And there were moments where I was like, is this still going to happen? Like, what's going to happen to publishing? And are there room for books anymore? And like, what does that look like? And I'm very lucky. Like, my book got pushed, and I actually feel like it was for the best. So I'm like so happy with how everything worked out. But there were definitely moments where I was like, uh-oh, is this going to happen or not?
Would you ever like to be famous?
Famous? No. I would like to have like a comfortable amount of money. I feel like, so that I could just like write. I would love to just have writing as like the only thing I had to worry about. And, you know, making sure my family was well taken care of, and, you know, that my daughter got everything she wanted. But fame, like Beyonce or Rihanna, no, thank you. That seems really stressful.
If you could have any one non-supernatural talent or ability, what would it be?
Ooh, okay, I'm stuck between two on this one. So either the ability to speak lots of other languages, because I think other languages are beautiful and fascinating, and I only speak English. And so I would love to just wake up and suddenly know how to communicate in other languages, or to sing really well. And this is literally, I don't want to be famous. I just want to be able to sing well in the car. So
What are you working on now?
So I am working on my second book now. This is slated to come out in 2022, and I can share a little bit about it. So it's basically another book that's about a fat brown girl, but she's so different than Charlie. So her story is really about this obsession that she has with Instagram and with photography. So she really wants to get the recognition that she deserves on Instagram, and she finds herself just so obsessed with looking at what others are doing and comparing herself. And when she is going through a hard time, she kind of decides, you know what, I might just start catfishing people on Instagram and see what happens. And so she does it for kind of like the thrill of it. And it goes about as well as you think it's going to go. It does not go well at all for her. But the book is really supposed to get to the heart of, like, you know, our social media obsession, and what does that look like, and how do we learn to like accept ourselves when we're constantly bombarded by messages and pictures and things like that that are maybe not so true to life. So I'm excited about it.
Fantastic. Everyone check out Fat Chance Charlie Vega. The buy links are down below, and as well as links to Crystal's social media. So definitely give her a follow. Thank you so much for being on the channel, Crystal.
Thank you. This was so fun.